what would it look like to actually feel taken care of and nourished and allowed to just focus on your baby in this time? That's what I want people to think of, is what could the world look like if you didn't have to juggle a million things, but you could really focus on this magical threshold of getting to know the baby and getting to know what your family looks and feels like now. So you deserve support.
Welcome to the Journey to Birth podcast. Today's episode is an interview that focuses on the postpartum or fourth trimester and getting to know your new family. So to help us understand a bit about what that transition looks like, I've invited postpartum doula Kristy Hogue of Creative Cusp to share her insights about what every parent should know about the transition into the new family unit and how a postpartum doula can help support all aspects of that transition, from ensuring the parents are well nourished and slept to making sure Fido still gets his daily walks. I hope you enjoy this episode of Your Journey to Birth. Welcome to the Journey to Birth podcast. Today, I am really excited to introduce Kristy Hogue, soon to be Kristy Valdez, who is a postpartum doula at Creative Cusp Doula. Some other things that she does also that I'm sure she will share with us today is birth story listening, which I'm excited to learn more about, and innate traditions postpartum training. So Kristy, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much. It's really good to be here and talk to you about the postpartum space.
Yeah. So why don't you start by telling us a little bit about how you support parents in the transition from being an expectant parent to a new parent, or just adding another new baby into the household?
Yeah, definitely. I really see my role as taking care of parents as they cross that threshold into the new dynamic of their family, and really being able to take care of parents so that they can focus on taking care of their newborn and finding their confidence within that new routine.
So what are some of the things that you see in families who are consulting with you or thinking about bringing in a postpartum doula before they have you come in? What are their concerns? What kinds of things are they dealing with? And how does that change after they have an opportunity to work with you?
So I work with some clients who are already in their fourth trimester, and I also work with other clients who are bringing me in prenatally to help plan for their fourth trimester. I would say that when I work with clients who are already in the thick of things, typically they are bringing in postpartum support from me and other practitioners because they're struggling with something like breastfeeding or just getting the sleep that they need or finding their confidence and legs underneath them. A lot of times we see first-time parents who don't really know that they're going to need extra support before they've crossed into the fourth trimester. And pretty quickly, I'd say within the first week or so, when parents start to get a bit overwhelmed, they'll call on the support of a postpartum doula. And that's typically when I'll get some referrals from other practitioners in the area too. Like if somebody had a birth doula and their birth doula is kind of winding down their support and realizing that the family is going to need a little bit of extra help. Prenatally, I find that families are calling me in because usually they're second-time parents and they have had the experience of being overwhelmed in the fourth trimester and just know now that they need a little bit more support, especially with having multiple kids in the family, to make sure that life can continue to go on and all of the obligations that they have can get filled even while they're caring for a newborn around the clock. The other thing that I see sometimes is parents who have had a difficult birth who are needing a little extra help with physical recovery and healing, or kind of integrating tough emotions, sometimes some trauma, or some extra help around mental health in the postpartum period.
So it looks like you have a lot of different ways that you're able to support families who are preparing to add a new baby into the household, where you can help them kind of pre-plan for what that's going to look like, as well as help families who who have already made that transition and have baby in arms and are just looking for a little bit of extra support during those early weeks or months.
Yeah, definitely. With all of those clients, what my role is to really make sure that I understand exactly what their needs are, what their goals are around their own recovery from a physical standpoint, a reintegration from a mental standpoint, as well as just what their life looks like and what's important for them to get done. And that can be anywhere from the dog needs to get walked on a regular basis to sibling support, like I had mentioned, or really digging in with processing tough, challenging emotions or some fear and lack of confidence around caring for their baby and finding their new routines. So much of that I also find centers around sleep and being fed as well. So I think a lot of times think about the postpartum period and the fourth trimester around the baby's sleep and how the baby is going to get fed. And it's just as important to think about how parents are going to get sleep and how they're going to get fed, because there isn't a single one of us as humans that can operate off of very little or no sleep and no food at all. But those are typically the things that go to the wayside when we're trying to adjust and we have a baby with the stomach the size of a grape who is eating around the clock and not sleeping for long periods of time. So I can come in and help find those times for protected rest where parents can get a little bit of extra sleep, and also help make some nourishing meals for them so they can focus on feeding their baby and I can focus on feeding parents.
Yeah, that's great. Sleep and getting those really healthy, nourishing foods that are also going to continue to support the recovery in the postpartum stage and her breastfeeding are so super important. Do you find yourself being contacted more by people who maybe don't have a close network of support, like family around, or are you just as equally likely to be contacted by people who have family close by, but maybe aren't getting the right kind of support?
I would say at this point, it's pretty equal, because I think that even folks who have a lot of people around them don't always have the exact support that they need. Especially, I find that folks who are choosing to feed their baby from their body, we've lost a lot of that cultural knowledge. And so they may not have family and friends who have breastfed or chest fed before and aren't always supportive of those goals in particular. Or they may have, in general, folks may have a lot of friends and family that want to come and hold the baby and get pictures taken and are really excited about seeing baby and making sure that baby is doing well. But what gets lost is the parent, especially the birthing parent, in all of that. So just because somebody has a lot of folks around them doesn't necessarily still mean that anybody is making them meals or doing their laundry or walking the dog or making sure that they're getting the rest that they need.
Yes, definitely. When a family hires you to come in and help them out, how long do you find you're generally working with that family?
That is something that really differs with every family. I have worked with some families for only a week. They just kind of needed somebody who was there on week 2 and wanted to get a routine down, specifically with breastfeeding and feeling a little bit better about just how they were going to create those new routines in their life. And then I've worked with other families for a very extended period of time who need a little bit more help in that confidence factor. In particular, I can think of folks that I've helped that are the first people that they know to have a baby. They're the first people in their social circle. And the challenge of the fourth trimester was really something they couldn't anticipate and is also not something that a lot of their social circle understands and is able to help them with. And so having that extended support is really helpful for them. And eventually folks, some sooner rather than later, transition back to work. And that's the other part where I see an increase in people needing support is, okay, so we had a period of time, whether that was a week or 3 months, where folks could be at home and parents could really adjust to their newborn. And now that is disrupted by one or both parents going back to work and just needing an extra set of hands again to get into that new groove.
So it sounds like it's something that's kind of very specific to each individual family, and you have a way to help them kind of assess what their specific needs are going to be and how to
definitely
help them through that.
That's another reason why I like to help people plan prenatally for the postpartum period as well. By being able to sit down for a few hours before the baby comes, before you're in the thick of it, you can really map out who are your rings of support. You have your partner potentially, you have your care practitioners potentially. What other family or friends are around? Do you have a church community or a neighborhood group? And what are the pieces that you could ask each of those people for support on? And by doing that, you can go into the postpartum period not necessarily having everything worked out, because things change. And you never really know what your experience is going to be until you're in it. But you can have a little bit better idea of who's going to show up for you and how long you might need that help and when you might hit some rough patches.
Mm-hmm. And I imagine that helps, having that kind of established beforehand is going to help them with that confidence piece a bit.
Definitely.
They know who that network is. Could you tell me a little bit about what a day or a night looks like having a postpartum doula in your house?
Yeah, absolutely. So I typically find that most clients that I serve, I do in about 3 to 4 hour shifts. And I mostly serve clients during the daytime and not overnights. But during the day, that typically looks like showing up. Washing my hands is the very first thing that I do. That was definitely drilled into me in my training and is a good rule of thumb for any guests that parents have in their house. But after washing my hands, the absolute second thing that I do is just ask parents, when was the last time that baby ate? And when was the last time you ate? And then when was the last time baby slept? And when was the last time you slept? And that helps me gauge what my shift is going to look like. If parents have not had anything to eat and I'm coming in at 2 p.m, they've probably been up since 4 or 5 a.m. And I know that I'm going to need to at least get some snacks in their hand right away and probably make a larger meal for them. If they had a good night of sleep before, then we might prioritize some other things other than sleep. But that's definitely the first question that I ask. And over time, when I get into a routine with clients, typically I'm showing up right around the time that they are feeding the baby in whatever way they're choosing to do that. So we can get some time in where if they have questions about feeding, they can ask those and I can help troubleshoot. And then if they haven't slept, I will typically take baby right after they're done eating and give parents some space to get some sleep for a 2 to 3 hour chunk of time, which may be the first time in days that they've had 3 full hours to take a nap. And I'll typically bring a carrier, strap that baby onto me, and get some chores done. Do some laundry for them, wash dishes, tidy up, cook a meal, and just do things around the house that I know they need done. Some of that is because I've talked to them beforehand and I know what their priorities are, what's going to make them feel good in their house. Sometimes it's just looking around and seeing what needs to get done. And then parents wake up and typically it's time to feed baby again. So what's nice about a 3 to 4 hour shift is you can get 2, sometimes even 3 full feeding cycles in there, and really help parents get confident in how they're doing that and how much baby is eating, and help reassure them with all of that. Other things that might come up in a shift is I might put together a sitz bath for a parent, which is like a shallow, warm bath, usually with comforting herbs that the birthing parent can sit in for about 20, 30 minutes. Just, it's hard right after birth to get your body all the way down on the ground like you would for a bathtub. And after a cesarean in particular, you can't be immersed in water with your scar. So putting together a sitz bath that immerses you, just your hips and lower section, is really helpful and comforting for a parent, and also increases circulation and ability to heal there. So doing really nourishing, helpful things like that could be a part of my shift as well.
I'm interrupting this episode for a quick but important message. Working in the birth world for over 10 years means I've heard countless stories where birthing parents handed over their authority without even knowing it, where they made compromises in their birth that they thought they had to make. But the real problem was that they didn't have a birth vision to be their constant guide, their North Star. So they didn't know when they were failing to communicate or when they were making unnecessary compromises. But you, being the smart podcast listener you are, you don't have to follow that path. You can birth your way in your control without compromises. Because I'm offering you, my Journey to Birth podcast listener, the opportunity to get started on changing your path to birth with a special offer on my Introduction to Your Natural Birth Compass online childbirth course. Yep, that's right. I want to see you have an extraordinary birth experience. Because changing how we approach and support birth as a whole nation, it begins with you. With the information that you learn here, you can create waves in your birth community that will continue to send ripples of change out everywhere. And it starts by simply creating your birth vision. So if you want to get started on your birth vision today, go to naturalbirthcompass.com/birth vision. Once you're there, click the link to join. Then just enter your email and use coupon code JOURNEY for your exclusive discount that's only available to podcast listeners. I can't wait to see the splash you make. Your birth just might change the world. And now, back to the show. So one thing I really like to focus on that you touched on a little bit already is trying to get some information out there to parents who are expecting their first child, because they really don't know what to expect out of the whole process, really. Like, they can read the books, they can ask their friends if they're not the first in their social group, or their older sibling or their parents, and read all the books, the websites, all of that. But the reality is they just don't know what they don't know, what they haven't experienced. And that can be true of adding another child into the household as well. But I think more so for first-time parents, we really see this. They don't even know that they need to be reaching out for this kind of help. So assuming that we're getting into the ears of some of these first-time expecting parents, when do you suggest they be consulting with a postpartum doula to see if it's something that they might want to bring in, or be interviewing people? So if they do need to call on that help, they're already ready to go with somebody they know that they connect with really well. And to piggyback on top of that, what kinds of things should they be asking as they're looking for a postpartum doula? Because this podcast is outside, reach outside of just where we are. So not everybody's going to be able to have you in their house. So what should they do to be finding someone who's going to be able to help them and support them?
Yeah, definitely. I think that looking around for a postpartum doula and just learning more about who's available in your community is something that expecting parents can do right from the get-go. And if they're choosing to get a birth doula or really any other care practitioner in their life, they can ask those folks if they know postpartum doulas. It can sometimes be hard to just Google it. Doulamatch.net, I believe it is a great resource. But other care practitioners that you are receiving care from, and those personal references are always highly valued if you have an established relationship with someone. I would say by the third trimester, really looking at meeting with some postpartum doulas, especially by week 34, 35, and just seeing if you have a connection with them would be a great idea. The things to bring up when you're speaking with a postpartum doula is just be really transparent with what your life looks like today and the parts of your life that you really value. So knowing what your obligations are that aren't going to go away. I think I use walking the dog as an example all the time, because the dog still needs to get walked no matter what, even if you can afford to get behind on laundry sometimes, but the dog's going to still need to go out. And other things that are obligations in your life, or just priorities, things that you need to keep going in order for you to feel good. Being transparent about when and if you're going back to work, so that a doula might know the timeline that they'd be working with and some of the upcoming events that would influence that. And other than that, I would say just your gut feeling and the personal connection that you have with all of your care practitioners, including a postpartum doula, is so important. I am a strong believer that our intuition tells us a lot. And if you're inviting someone into your home to be a part of your routines and to work with you and your baby and to really see you at a vulnerable time, and a time where things are really, the whole world has kind of just broken open, you want to be comfortable with that person. So finding someone who feels good there.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think those little responsibilities that have just become such a habit and such a normal part of our daily routine, we forget, or we don't realize how complicated those are going to be once we have this whole other factor of a little human who requires 23 hours and 59 minutes of our attention per day in the beginning. So that's a good point to bring up. Even something as simple as walking the dog, it becomes a much bigger piece of the puzzle to have to figure out when everything is turned upside down for those first weeks, sometimes month, depending on the personality of the baby and the healing of mom in the fourth trimester. And then really finding time to be able to keep up on that self-care piece as well. So that sounds like a great way, having that postpartum doula who understands that you need that self-care and can help you figure out how to get it and what kinds of things are going to be beneficial. So since you are the expert in the fourth trimester, can you tell us how you see the realities of the fourth trimester are different from what our expectations of it are before that baby is outside of the womb and in our arms?
Yeah, I think sometimes what I see with folks is that there aren't a lot of expectations, because we talk a lot about birth these days and encourage folks to have birth plans and to put a lot of energy there, and aren't necessarily talking about what the 2 weeks to 2 months after birth even looks like or might feel like. When we do get information about that, it can be a little polarized. Either kind of that Instagram, here's my adorable baby and we're going on this beautiful walk. There aren't a lot of people who are putting their entire life and complex emotions on social media, or sometimes behind closed doors or in private from our friends, and even more likely from our family, we're getting horror stories about their unsupported postpartum time and maybe some traumatic feelings that they haven't processed through all the way yet and are projecting onto new parents. So it can feel a little isolating to feel like you only have a 100% happy story or a 100% scary story, if you have anything at all. What I find is that the postpartum period is tough. It's challenging. It is something that you are facing after having gone through a very exhausting physical experience. And then the immediate demands are exhausting too, because you're now really invested in the survival and thriving of a baby that needs to eat around the clock and doesn't really care about what your needs as a parent are. That's just not the dynamic. And it's also within that challenge, it's something that parents can do and parents have the strength and resiliency for. And what I find is that I think probably the reason that social media can be so idealized is that people really want to celebrate the wins and the good times, because behind the scenes, it has felt so challenging, and they want to be out there and say, look at my beautiful baby. I did this. I'm doing this. I'm getting through it. And so it may not be the full picture. Know that behind every beautiful baby, there are sleepless nights, and there are times where you just don't want to have to feed them one more time, or there's no clean laundry and now you just have a naked baby for a while that you're trying to figure out what to do with. Everybody's going to have those experiences. There are going to be tough and challenging times, and we get through it. We do it.
Yeah, we really do find a way of getting through it. But how much better is it with having that postpartum doula support? So thank you for sharing those beautiful words. And now after baby comes home, we have this whole nother family unit, right? We all know that this baby needs an immense amount of care. What, people who don't work in the birth world, especially, and people who don't work in the postpartum world forget is that definitely the mom, but probably both parents also need a whole lot of care. So can you tell us about some of the things that you do to support their transition into becoming parents, their transition from going from that birth and whatever happened in that birth, that they're also bringing home with them as part of who they've become now, and how you help support that whole transition with some of the extra work that you do. Like, I know the birth story listening plays into some of that, helping the parents to go through and process their birth and help them transition into parenthood with that. And then is that also where the innate traditions postpartum training comes in as well? Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit about some of those things and how those work to help?
Yeah, definitely. So kind of building off of this idea that the postpartum and the reality that the postpartum period is challenging, and also we're all just kind of immersed in it and doing it. There are ways that we can do this alone. There are plenty of people who are doing this alone or just with a partner, but being able to bring in some extra support can be really helpful to ensure that we are creating an environment where folks are feeling like they can process through their experiences that happened during the birth and that are happening now, and gaining confidence. So a couple of ways that I do that and I support parents through that are through birth story listening, like you mentioned, which I think is great to do anytime. You can be 20 years postpartum and still benefit from telling somebody and processing through your birth story. You can also be 2 days postpartum and experience a lot of benefit from that. So I really love the birth story listening and birth story medicine framework, which was developed by Pam England, who also developed Birthing from Within. And
she is wonderful.
She is wonderful. And the framework of her training is one that really acknowledges the reality and the truth of every individual's experience, and the fact that things have the potential to not only play out a million different ways, but the way that we make sense of those and the way that we integrate that understanding in our psyches and in our body is also reliant on a million different factors, like what we have experienced in our past, where we're coming from, the dynamics that are playing into our lives in general. So it's really a process of listening to parents tell their birth story, pulling out the themes and the key pieces that parents are making meaning from out of their birth story, and helping parents really see those threads and understand where they might be coming from. It also engages a lot of empathetic acknowledgement and understanding and really validates parents. It really helps them see that, yeah, experiences are hard and nobody can take that away from you. Just because baby is healthy now doesn't mean that the difficulty or even the trauma that you experienced during your birth is invalid. Those can both be true. And having a healthy baby is not the end all be all. Having a healthy parent is really essential too. And so really being able to work with parents around those difficult experiences, validate them, and help them see exactly where those feelings were coming from, where the fear might have arisen, and how they were basically doing the best that they could in that situation with the information that they had. I think that that can be said for all of our experiences, is we're just operating off of what we know, and we're all doing the best that we can.
Great. I love that. I love to hear it acknowledged how important those birth stories are, and how much deeper it goes than just healthy mom, healthy baby at the end. So thank you for doing that beautiful work. My last question for you then is, what is the one thing that you wish every new parent knew before becoming a parent?
I would say that I want parents to know that they deserve support. And it's always okay to ask for help and ask for the support that you need. Like I said, it is possible to do this alone, and lots of people do that. But I truly believe that going through the postpartum period alone is typically at the expense of something else. And sometimes that's as little as the dog not getting walked as regularly as you want. But so often it's at the expense of our mental health and at the expense of our confidence and happiness in parenting. And so birthing folks are meant to be taken care of. Parents and families are meant to be taken care of. And it's okay to ask for that. We find a lot of pride in being independent these days, and I think that's great, and we're so strong. And what would it look like to actually feel taken care of and nourished and allowed to just focus on your baby in this time? That's what I want people to think of, is what could the world look like if you didn't have to juggle a million things like you're used to, but you could really focus on this magical threshold of getting to know the baby and getting to know what your family looks and feels like now. So you deserve support.
Yeah, that's perfect. I think giving people permission to ask for that help and bring that in, because the whole not having the village to raise our families is really relatively new in our culture. You know, it's what we've generally known in our lifetimes, but in the expanse of human nature, it's really relatively new nowadays, even if that village is just bringing in one very amazing postpartum doula to come in and help keep you, mentally and physically in a better place.
Yeah. And I would say that there are postpartum doulas and other postpartum support that are available to everyone. So no matter what your current financial resources are, definitely look around and reach out, see if folks have sliding scales or the ability to serve you. Sometimes even just doing the postpartum planning with a doula can be so immensely helpful, because they can help you identify the other folks who might be available to be with you in the postpartum time. So that can be a more financially accessible way to receive some support as well.
And is that kind of thing, or even with your birth story listening, are those types of things that you offer virtually, or that postpartum doulas offer virtually? Okay. So how would people go about finding you if they wanted to contact you about that? Or people who live locally in Seattle and want to contact Kristy about having them come into your house.
Yeah, definitely. So my website is Creative Cusp postpartumdoula.com. And I have all of my information there on how to have in-home doula support. I do my prenatal planning sessions for the 4th trimester in person if folks would like just that piece. And I also do them virtually, and folks will come out of that with a full written up postpartum plan that they can refer to. And sometimes it's even helpful to hand that out to family when they arrive. So we can do that together. And folks can also find me on Instagram at Creative Cusp, and reach out via DM or email on the website whenever. I love chatting with folks, even if they just have a one-off question, always looking to be helpful to people.
Great. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Kristy. Thanks for sharing with us a bit about how postpartum doulas can help parents integrate into being new parents or adding a new member to the household, and for just giving people permission to ask for that help, that it is something that over the long run is going to really help them settle into that new family so much better, with such a better level of health. Just that being able to sleep and have that food prepared for you is such a blessing. Just that in itself would definitely more than pay for having a postpartum doula, plus all the other ways that these lovely women know how to help parents adjust to the new transition.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much for...
Yes, thank you. Thank you for listening and being open to new perspectives as we spent this time together. You can find Kristy at creativecuspdoula.com. I will put her information in the show notes so you can check out the amazing work she's providing our community and contact her if you're getting ready to expand your family and want to make sure you have all the resources to be as prepared as possible. As always, let me know how I can support your journey. If you have topics you want to hear about, guests you'd like to hear from, or questions or comments to share, let me know. This podcast is always transforming, and you can help shape it into something that helps thousands of new families have the best pregnancy, birth, and transition into parenthood possible by leaving a comment or a review so they can find us, or sharing this podcast with others in your life who will benefit from these discussions. Find me on the socials at Natural Birth Compass, or email me at info@naturalbirthcompass.com. And don't forget to subscribe to this podcast so you don't miss out on our next episode. Wishing you a wonderful journey to birth.